My name's Trevor Eyles, originally from the UK, but have lived and worked in Denmark for the past 35 years. I trained in the UK as a psychiatric nurse and worked in Scotland for 3 years at a psychiatric hospital, a very progressive psychiatric hospital in Scotland called Dingleton Hospital, where Maxwell Jones introduced the community psychiatry. I wanted to experience something that was more progressive than the place that I trained at, because already as a newly qualified psychiatric nurse, I was aware that I didn't agree with most of the things that were happening. Somehow I had to make a decision. Do I continue to work within a system which I don't agree with mostly, or do I stay in that system and try to change it from the inside? So that's basically what my decision was. When I was in Denmark and came into contact with the Hearing Voices movement, this is where I really decided that this was something that psychiatry would benefit from, and I worked in state-run services in Aarhus in Denmark, and began to implement help and support for voice hearers. So that's what I maybe would focus on as my area of expertise, because I have now more than 20 years of experience introducing and developing a service of support for voice hearers within psychiatry and later outside of psychiatry. I met a lot of resistance from clinical psychiatry, from psychiatrists, clinicians who thought these ideas were too radical. They still considered voice hearing to be a symptom of an illness, typically schizophrenia, as we know. But what was interesting was that many people that had been in services as voice hearers and been diagnosed and treated with medication, often for many, many years, didn't gain any benefit from that. The situation didn't change. In fact, for most of them, the more medication they got, the more problematic it became with the voices. What I tried to introduce was very much based on what we call the Maastricht approach, developed by Marius Romme and Sandra Escher and Dirk Korstens. And I collaborated very much with those people during the first few years. So people began to hear about it and be interested in coming to meet me and other people that began to work with it. And it just grew from there. I think what changed after a few years was that some of the people some of the voice hearers I worked with improved so much that they left services. Then management realized that this saved them an awful lot of money. So they began to say, oh, okay, maybe you should do more of this. So it equates into financial and budgets, and the management understand this a lot better than the investment in people, which is sad, but a fact of life. So within a couple of years, I was employed in social psychiatric services as a voice hearing consultant, and continued for many years in that role, learning as I went from the voice hearers. It was not really possible to learn this by reading about it. There's not a lot of literature that provides information about how to do this. But as I said, I collaborated very much with Dirk Korstens to begin with. We did many what we call voice dialogue workshops, 3-day workshops, where we invited professionals and voice hearers to participate together. Most of what I know is from voice hearers, from participating in group situations and or working individually with voice hearers.
In what they call here the mental health industry, what were your ideas and why were they seen as radical?
When I say resistance, that's putting it mildly. In some cases, I was met with a direct sort of, you may not do this attitude. So in some cases, it was a really strong resistance. I think the main area of disagreement for me was that many people I met were heavily medicated. The medication was given to get rid of the voices. If a voice hearer continues to hear voices, then the medication was increased. And this happened many times. So a lot of the people I met and began to work with were heavily medicated, not functioning very well generally in their life, and still heard voices. So it was clear to me that this was a treatment that was not beneficial. The only benefit that most people talked about was that it helped maybe when they were really distressed, when the voices were really active, it helped to reduce their anxiety. It helped them to perhaps sleep. But it had no direct, almost no direct impact on the voices. When I say that, one of the things people do say about the direct impact on the voices is that the voices say, you should not take this medication. So the voices intuitively know that it's not a good idea.
You told me last night that almost 100% of psychiatrists in the country you live in are not so good for you. Why the system doesn't change? Seeing people like Michael or Matt who have testimonies, who say, yeah, what helped us was not medication, was not hospital, was just being listened to, being human with someone who wants really to help me, who understands, and who helped me to find my ways. Why the industry, the system, doesn't listen to them?
Well, I think it's more than 20 years now, and we have more and more people telling their stories. More and more people have benefited from the voice hearing approach. So I think it has changed. I don't think it's changed enough, but there's certainly a huge difference compared to when I started 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago now. We have psychiatric hospitals implementing help and support for voice hearers, acknowledging the fact that in most cases it is related to some sort of trauma or emotional crisis. That's a good start. For more than 10 years now, we started a group on what we call a forensic unit, a closed unit where people are forcibly detained under a treatment order. So a voice hearing group has existed there on that. So that's a huge difference. It hasn't happened nationally, but in many places around Denmark, there are voice hearing groups. People implement the approach also in psychiatric services. So things have changed. What hasn't changed so much is the open support and interest from psychiatrists themselves. What I keep telling myself, or what we keep telling ourselves, is that we should just keep doing what we're doing. Because the evidence is there, as you say, people tell their stories, and there are so many people that have benefited from this approach that maybe don't even, are not even a part of psychiatric services anymore. They've moved on. They have families, they have jobs, they have other areas of interest.
Is there resistance nowadays because of pharmaceutical lobby?
I think this is one of the main areas of contention, is that the pharmaceutical industry, it's kind of a disharmony between psychiatric services, which should be based on compassion, and the pharmaceutical industry, which is based on profit. And these two have to work together, and they don't fit, in my view.
And what about in Denmark? How is this industry, pharmacy, works? They have links with psychiatrists, for example?
I think so. I think it's evident then that psychiatrists primarily give medication. The evidence to support the continual prescribing of medication is so little. I mean, few people respond well to large doses of antipsychotic medication or antidepressants, and it's so that there's also a resistance to help people to reduce it if it's not working, or if they want to reduce medication. So that's another area of contention that is problematic. I think that we try to help and support people that realize that they've been taking medication for many years, perhaps, without it doing them any good. In fact, probably more harm than good. That's my definite experience. There's no doubt about that.
What did you learn from yesterday morning, with your experiences of just listening, your exchanges with your colleagues? And what I heard the word love, for example. We don't hear that in the hospitals or in the clinics very often. Maybe I don't know if you use this word, but what words, what ideas, what feelings did feed you?
Yeah, I think that, as I said, I've worked in psychiatry most of my adult life, possibly 40 years. And I know it's a word that's not used very often in psychiatry, within psychiatry. We don't talk about love, we don't talk about sex. These are taboo subjects that are so important in people's lives. So it's crazy we don't talk about these things. So that's one of the attractive things about learning about just listening and the Humane Clinic. One of the reasons why we came so far to find out a little bit more. But yeah, I love the concept of it's taking a step further. We try to be compassionate in our relationships, and it is all about relationships, being with people. But love is something that's not talked about, and there's so much more room for love. Yeah.
I didn't ask you about Michael. We just interviewed before.
Yeah.
Can you explain us how you helped him?
I think I was one of quite a few people that helped Michael. I'll say immediately that he has taught me a great deal as well. This is a fine example of how I've learned from working in a partnership. It's a collaboration. When I meet voice hearers, I don't work for them. I don't work to fix them. I invite them to a partnership. So we work together, and we help each other, and we explore. But I met Michael probably, I think 6, 7, 8 years ago, when he already heard about the hearing voices, and he came to a workshop that I did at a time when he was quite distressed by the voices. I think I made it even worse. He felt very provoked by me, and tells that story now when we teach that he needed that provocation, he needed that challenge, and gradually began to, because I wasn't afraid to ask questions because I wasn't afraid of his experiences with the voices. We gradually began to have a conversation about it, and then I think perhaps he trusted me well enough to ask me to work with him individually. So that's kind of how it developed. We worked with his voices, and he developed an understanding of why the voices were there, what they meant for him, and changed the relationship. What Michael probably also told was that he has visions. He sees things that other people don't. And they were as troubling, if not more troubling, than the voices. So he still had this as a problem area in his life and tried to address it, but couldn't really find a way to do it. So we began collaborating on that as well, and worked very systematically with exploring and trying to understand the meaning behind these things, which of course he achieved. And although he still has these experiences, he understands fully the meaning of them, and they're neither frightening nor troubling or worrying. On the contrary, they are perceived as kind of guides for him. So now we work together, helping other people, teaching healthcare professionals and working with voice hearers.
So you helped in this relationship, the voices became not the distress, but the help in his life, yeah, and the pride.
That's kind of the concept, is to not get rid of the voices, but to help people to accept the voices and change the relationship with the voices to the better. Many people just couldn't imagine being without the voices now. Some people do experience the voices disappearing, being integrated maybe. And some people, despite the fact that the voices have been extremely distressing for many years, when they disappear, they miss them. That's something that happens quite often. So then you have to work through that. How do we adjust to the voices not being there? That's quite interesting too.